Your HR department just told you you're a high-value employee. You felt good about that. That was the point. Because here's what nobody tells you about corporate language. It was never designed to inform you. It was designed to manage you. And there are specific phrases, ones that sound like compliments, like opportunities, like reassurance, that are actually the early warning system for what's coming next. You've heard them. You probably smiled when they said them. This video is going to make sure you never do that again. Let's talk about the version of work you were sold. You show up. You perform. You get recognized. And when there's a problem, HR is there to protect you. Now here's what the data says. According to PwC's 2024 Trust Survey, 86% of business leaders believe they are highly trusted by their employees. Only 67% of employees actually trust their employer. That's almost a 20-point gap between what leadership believes is happening and what employees are actually experiencing. And nobody in that gap is talking honestly. Instead, they're talking in phrases. You're sitting in a one-on-one with your manager. They tell you the company really values your contributions. They say you're someone with a lot of potential here. They mention their door is always open. Meanwhile, Gallup has another number for you. Only 29% of U.S. workers trust how their performance is actually being evaluated. Less than 1 in 3. That means when your manager says those things, there's a high probability that neither of you is operating in a shared reality. You think you know where you stand. The data says you probably don't. Most people think HR exists to help employees. It doesn't. HR exists to protect the company from employees. That is not a cynical opinion. That is the legal and organizational reality of what human resources is. HR is trained in employment law. HR manages termination documentation. HR knows exactly what can and cannot be said before a company is exposed to a lawsuit. Think about this. A recent survey found that 4 in 10 American workers, 40%, do not trust their HR department. And yet the same survey found that 76% of workers have never even contacted HR. So they don't trust it, and they don't use it, which means HR's primary audience isn't you. It's the company. Every phrase that comes out of HR, or out of a manager who was coached by HR, has been filtered through one question first. Not, what does this employee need to hear? But, what is the safest, most legally defensible thing to say? That's the architecture underneath the language. Now let's go phrase by phrase. Because once you hear what these actually mean, you cannot unhear them. This is just one piece of what's really happening at work. Like it so more people wake up. Share it with a colleague who needs this reality check. Subscribe Workplace Decoded to start playing smarter, not just harder. Phrase 1. We see a lot of potential in you. This one sounds like a compliment. It is not. Read the phrase again carefully. Not value. Potential. Potential means the real thing hasn't happened yet. And in corporate language, potential is a holding pattern. Here's what the data shows. According to a standout CV analysis of over 19,000 corporate employees, the average time to promotion inside a major U.S. company is 30.4 months. 2.5 years. And right now, the average employee has been in their role for 48.6 months, a year and a half longer. The word potential itself gives your company something very valuable. A reason to delay your raise, your promotion, your title, without ever explicitly saying no. Because how do you argue with potential? You can't. That's the point. Phrase number 2. We're a family here. This phrase does very specific psychological work. Families sacrifice for each other. Families don't negotiate. Families don't leave when things get hard. When a company calls itself a family, it is borrowing the emotional architecture of that word to get you to do things you would never agree to in a normal transaction. Unpaid overtime? Family pitches in. No raise this cycle? Family understands. Your workload just doubled? Family shows up. Here is what that family actually looks like in the numbers. According to SHRM's 2025 State of the Workplace report, 34% of U.S. workers reported receiving no recognition at all for their contributions. 1 in 3 people in the family invisible. And the research on companies that use this language, they consistently rank lower on compensation transparency, work-life boundaries, and actual career development. And when the company needs to cut 12% of headcount, family has nothing to do with it. The decision happens in a spreadsheet, not around a dinner table. Phrase number 3. My door is always open. It is often the opposite. Here is what actually happens when you walk through that door. You raise a concern about your manager. HR listens carefully. They thank you for coming to them. They assure you it will remain confidential. And then, because HR's first obligation is to the company, that information gets quietly routed to the exact people you were concerned about. Not necessarily out of malice. Out of structure. HR reports to leadership. HR protects the company's legal exposure. What you said in confidence becomes documentation. Now you're the employee who raised a flag. The open door doesn't create transparency. In many organizations, it creates a paper trail. Going to HR is rarely a neutral move. Treat it like any high-stakes decision, strategically, not emotionally. Phrase number 4. We're restructuring to better align with our strategic goals. Translation: someone is losing their job. Possibly you. This is the most legally sanitized phrase in the corporate dictionary. Notice what it does. It makes the decision sound inevitable. It frames it as logical and forward-looking. It removes all human accountability. No one decided anything. The strategy just aligned. You cannot debate a restructuring. You cannot counterpropose a strategic alignment. The words were engineered to be unanswerable. Here's what's happening underneath that language. According to Gallup's 2025 State of the Workforce report, 50% of U.S. employees are either actively looking for a new job or watching for their next opportunity. Half the workforce, already mentally halfway out the door. When you hear this phrase near your department or your team, the decision has already been made, approved, and documented. You are hearing the announcement, not the conversation. Update your resume. That day. Phrase number 5. We're putting you on a performance improvement plan to support your growth. Let's be precise about this one. In most U.S. companies, it is a legal document. It exists to create a paper trail that justifies your termination in a way the company can defend in litigation. The plan sets objectives, vague enough to be subjective, specific enough that any shortfall is documented. The timeline is typically 30 to 90 days, exactly the window HR needs to build a clean, defensible case. And the data confirms what most people suspect but can't prove. Only 41% of employees placed on a PEEP successfully complete it. That means 59% do not. And of those who do complete it successfully, research shows that very few go on to thrive at that same company. Because the relationship was already broken before the plan began. The PIP was the documentation of that decision. Here is the hidden cost that nobody talks about. While you're working inside the PIP, extending good faith, trying to prove yourself, showing up harder, the company is building the exit paperwork. You are funding your own termination filing with 60 to 90 days of your best work. That's not a conspiracy. That's the design. If you receive a P, consult an employment attorney before you sign a single thing. Not after. Before. Phrase number 6. We really value everything you bring to the team. This phrase appears in 2 very specific moments. Right before they tell you the raise isn't happening this year. Or right before they let you go. Value is not compensation. Value is not a title change. Value is not a renewed contract. Here's the hard number underneath this phrase. 94% of employees would stay longer with career development, and yet only 30% of companies offer it. That gap between what employees need to stay and what companies actually provide is where this phrase lives. It fills the space where action should be. Appreciation without action is a retention technique. It costs nothing. It buys time, and it works, until it doesn't. Phrase 7. That decision was made above my pay grade. Your manager says this, and seems genuinely sympathetic. They might be. But notice what the phrase accomplishes. It removes them from accountability, while delivering news that directly changes your life. The decision maker is always just out of reach. Above your pay grade. Above your manager's pay grade. Permanently inaccessible. This is diffusion of responsibility dressed as candor. You can't appeal. You can't negotiate. You can't escalate. The chain of accountability was dissolved before you walked into the room. And the meeting ends. So what do you actually do? You stop outsourcing your career security to their language. When they say potential, you ask for a timeline. Specific dates. Specific metrics. In writing. When they say we're restructuring, you start building optionality. Not in panic. Quietly. Strategically. When they put you on a PIP, you consult an employment attorney before you sign a single thing. When they say the door is always open, you remember who owns the building. And when they tell you they value you, ask yourself, where is that value reflected? If it isn't there, the phrase was just time management. Your time, managed by them. None of this requires being difficult. None of this requires being adversarial. It requires being clear-eyed. Every phrase in this video was built for one purpose: to keep you productive, compliant, and emotionally settled, long enough for the company to complete a decision you weren't part of. That is not a conspiracy. That is an institution behaving exactly as institutions behave. But here's the thing about systems. Once you can see the architecture, you stop living inside it on their terms. That's the only freedom that actually matters in that building.